Some murders scream for justice. Others whisper from beneath a layer of dust. And in one silent library, that whisper nearly went unheard, except by Sherlock Holmes. You're listening to the Detective Files, where every shadow hides a secret, and every case demands a brilliant mind, starring Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in their most chilling investigations yet. The morning fog draped itself over Baker Street like a mourner's veil, thick and listless. Mrs. Hudson had just brought in the tea when Holmes startled both of us by hurling the Times across the room. "Stackwood is dead," he muttered. "Stackwood?" I repeated. "Algernon Stackwood, the eccentric bibliophile." "The same." Found lifeless in his private library in Kensington. Holmes turned toward the fireplace, apparently of heart failure. "So says the paper. But wasn't he quite healthy?" Holmes nodded once, slowly. "Which is precisely why I am suspicious. I was used to his intuition, but this seemed sudden, even for Holmes. Surely a man can die of heart failure without foul play being involved." Holmes didn't answer immediately. He simply walked to his violin and drew the bow across the strings once. A low, drawn-out note that vibrated through the sitting room like a warning bell. Stackwood was no ordinary man, Watson. He guarded his collection of rare books like a dragon guards gold. First editions, banned manuscripts, ink-stained secrets of history. He once turned away Prince Leopold because he hadn't booked an appointment. And now he's dead. Holmes nodded again, and unless I'm mistaken, the killer left no footprints, only the quiet shuffle of dust. Before I could press further, a firm knock echoed from the door downstairs. Within moments, Mrs. Hudson returned with a card. Holmes took one glance at it and smirked. "Inspector Lestrade," he said, punctual as always. When it suits him, the inspector appeared in his usual manner, coat wrinkled, hat in hand, brow furrowed with the weight of some irritation. "Stackwood," he said, dispensing with greetings. "You're aware?" "We are," Holmes replied, "and I presume Scotland Yard is less than convinced about the heart failure diagnosis." Lestrade grumbled. "His private physician signed off on it. But the family, well, what's left of it, demanded a second opinion. They've requested you." Quote. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Then we shan't keep them waiting." I retrieved my coat as Holmes reached for his overcoat and cane. Before long, we were seated in Lestrade's carriage, the cobbled streets of London rattling beneath the wheels. "Stackwood's butler found him around midnight," Lestrade explained, in his reading chair. The fire was low, candle still burning, looked like he'd fallen asleep, no signs of disturbance. "Doors locked from the inside," Holmes nodded, his fingers drumming against the cane, "and the dust." Lestrade raised an eyebrow. "Dust?" "Never mind. I'll explain later." When we arrived at Stackwood Manor, the butler, an elderly man named Wilkins, greeted us with practiced solemnity. "This way, gentlemen," he said. "Master Stackwood is still where we found him." The physician said to leave everything untouched. "Excellent," Holmes murmured. For once the dead are allowed to speak uninterrupted. We followed Wilkins down a dim corridor, where stained glass windows filtered in dusty bands of color. The heavy oak door to the library creaked open like something in a dream. And there he was, Algernon Stackwood, seated in a deep leather armchair by the hearth, his face pale, his fingers limp over the armrests, and his eyes half-lidded, in what could almost be mistaken for sleep. On the table beside him, a half-read book lay open. Not a single thing appeared out of place. Holmes walked in slowly, his gaze taking in everything. The high bookshelves, the carpet, the fireplace, the candle, still present, barely melted. "No signs of struggle," I whispered. "Nor signs of silence either," Holmes replied cryptically. Then he bent close to the floor, near the base of a nearby shelf. He touched the wood, then lifted his fingers, coated in grey dust. "The whisper," he murmured. "It's still here." And that, dear reader, was the moment I knew this case would not rest in peace. Holmes paced around the room like a conductor inspecting his orchestra. His eyes were sharp, taking in every detail. The arrangement of the books, the tilt of the table, even the wax drops from the candle that hadn't quite reached the floor. "There's something unusual in the air here," he muttered. "What do you mean?" I asked, following his gaze. "There are no open windows, yet the candle's flame is leaning in one direction, as though a door was recently opened." I turned my neck to glance at the door. It was closed from the inside, but according to the butler, all the doors were locked. And that's exactly what tells me so much, Holmes replied, his voice low but intense. He walked over to the desk where Stackwood had been sitting. Leaning forward, he examined the open book, a rare volume, Malleus Maleficarum, a 15th-century treatise on witchcraft. The edges of the pages weren't frayed with age, nor did they show signs of dust. Instead, they were too clean, as though the book had been recently opened. Interesting. Holmes murmured under his breath. What's interesting about it? I asked, unable to hide my curiosity. Holmes glanced back at me, his eyes gleaming with the spark of revelation. The book was turned just before his death, Watson. Someone wanted Stackwood to be reading something specific when he died. I was starting to piece together a strange picture. A man, locked away in his study surrounded by priceless books, suddenly dies, seemingly of natural causes, with no signs of a struggle. And yet, there was a deliberate silence in the room, a calculated stillness that didn't fit with a natural death. He stood up from the desk and motioned for me to follow him. Come, Watson. Let's take a closer look at his study. We walked over to the far side of the library, where rows of ancient books lined the walls. The smell of old paper and leather hung heavily in the air. Holmes ran his gloved fingers across the spines of the volumes, pausing only when he reached a thick tome at the very end. Stackwood's prized possession, he said quietly, pulling it from the shelf. The title read, The Alchemist's Secrets, but the book was locked shut with a peculiar brass clasp. Have you ever seen a book with such a clasp? Holmes asked, turning to me. It's a mechanism meant to hide something. I shook my head. Never. Exactly, Holmes said. He carefully opened the book, revealing a hidden compartment in the spine. Inside was a small, folded parchment. I watched as he unfolded the delicate paper, reading aloud the words scribbled inside. The truth lies where silence speaks louder than words. Curious, Holmes murmured, folding the paper back. Stackwood was clearly more involved in something than just collecting books. He returned the book to the shelf with a thoughtful frown and turned back toward the desk. Now, let's examine the body once again. As we made our way back to Stackwood's still form, Holmes bent low over the body, his fingers gently tapping the side of the chair. Then, he reached up and carefully adjusted Stackwood's glasses. An odd thing to do to a dead man, I thought. Holmes examined the glasses closely, as though something on them might reveal a hidden truth. What do you think, Watson? He asked. I'm not sure what to think, I replied honestly, my mind reeling. There's so much we don't know. Holmes stepped back and looked at me, and that's what's so crucial, Watson. There is a story hidden here. One that is not as simple as the papers would like us to believe. He straightened up and nodded to Lestrade, who had been observing silently from the doorway. We need to speak to the staff, particularly Wilkins, the butler. I have a feeling we haven't heard the full truth yet. Wilkins stood with his hands clasped behind his back, the stoic expression of a man trained to keep secrets etched into every wrinkle of his aged face. Holmes regarded him for a long moment before speaking. You served Mr. Stackwood for how many years, Wilkins? 31, sir. Nearly to the day. Then you knew his habits intimately. His routines, preferences, fears. Wilkins gave a curt nod. He was a private man. Very little disturbed him. He had a fondness for silence, and rare ink. Holmes arched an eyebrow. Rare ink? Yes, sir. He imported batches from France. Claimed it held better on parchment. Like it breathed differently, he used to say. Holmes exchanged a look with me before stepping closer. And when did you last see him alive? Yesterday evening, just after supper. He retired to his library, with a glass of port, told me not to disturb him. And the port? You poured it yourself? I did. Holmes nodded slowly. And when you returned? It was close to midnight. The library door was ajar. The fire was low, the candle nearly out. He was slumped in his chair. I thought he had fallen asleep until I saw his skin. Grey. Still. No breath. There was a long pause. Holmes said, and yet, the door was locked from the inside when Lestrade arrived. Wilkins swallowed. Yes, sir. But when I found him, it was slightly open. I assumed he had left it like that before passing. Holmes turned his back to Wilkins and addressed Lestrade. Did your men disturb anything before you arrived? No, Lestrade answered. We sealed the room once we got here. Everything's exactly as Wilkins described. Holmes nodded. then turned to me. Watson, do you recall the ink bottle on Stackwood's desk? Yes. Small, dark blue glass, nearly full. Precisely. And yet, Stackwood hadn't written anything. No pen, no parchment, no letter in progress. Why then the ink? The question hung in the air, Wilkins, Holmes said, turning back. Was Mr. Stackwood expecting correspondence? Or perhaps writing something important? Wilkins hesitated. I don't know, sir. He'd been pacing more than usual the past few days. Quiet. Distracted. But he said nothing to me directly. Holmes considered this, then walked toward the writing desk. He crouched and pulled open the lower drawer. After a moment of rummaging, he stood up with a triumphant flick of the wrist. He held out a folded letter. Half burnt. Someone tried to destroy this, Holmes murmured. He laid it flat on the desk and began reading the surviving words aloud. Cannot let the council know. They would burn it all. The manuscript must be hidden. The dust will speak. He stopped, eyes narrowing. Well, I said quietly, he certainly wasn't writing to a friend. Holmes gave a dry smile. No. And it seems he knew his time was running short. He turned to Wilkins again. Do you know anything of a manuscript Mr. Stackwood was working on? Wilkins hesitated once more. Too long this time. I may have overheard something, sir, he said slowly a few weeks ago. He was speaking to himself, I think. Muttering about pages, a dangerous truth, and something about an oath. I thought it was the usual nonsense. He often talked to his books more than to people. Holmes nodded. I would like to examine the lower library levels. Wilkins looked startled. Those are sealed, sir. He hadn't let anyone down there in years. Not even me. Then it's time someone did. Wilkins hesitated at the foot of the stairwell that led beneath the library floor. A trapdoor, half hidden beneath a faded oriental rug, creaked ominously as Holmes lifted it. I'll fetch a lamp, Wilkins offered, but Holmes raised a hand. No need. I brought my own. From his coat pocket he produced a compact lantern and lit it with a flick of his match. The flame illuminated the narrow wooden steps descending into pitch darkness. Watson, stay close, and keep your eyes open for anything out of place, or too neatly in place. We descended cautiously. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with dampness and the scent of mildew. The walls, once painted, now flaked in patches, revealing the bare stone beneath. As we reached the bottom, Holmes swung the lantern wide. A long corridor stretched before us, lined with narrow alcoves, and inside each alcove, more books. Older, dustier, bound in cracked leather or brittle parchment. This was no ordinary storage. This was a tomb for forgotten knowledge. Holmes moved with reverence, but his eyes were alert. He scanned the floor first, noting patterns in the dust, faint outlines of movement, gaps in the debris. Someone's been here, he whispered. How recently? I asked. Within the last 48 hours. Likely the night Stackwood died. We came upon a locked door near the corridor's end. Holmes inspected it quickly. This isn't a door to keep people out, he murmured. It's designed to keep something in. Without further explanation, he knelt and retrieved a small tool from his pocket. A flexible wire and tension wrench. And within seconds, the lock clicked open. The door creaked as it swung wide. Inside was a room no larger than a monk's cell. In the center stood a pedestal with a glass case upon it. And inside the case, a single thin volume bound in faded red leather. Holmes approached cautiously, examining the glass for traps or tampering. Then he smiled. Not a trap, but a decoy. He tapped the glass gently, and it wobbled ever so slightly. This is fresh, placed here recently. And the book inside. He removed the glass lid with care and picked up the book. Flipping through it, he sighed. Empty pages. Everyone. I stared at the blank pages. Then, where's the real manuscript? Holmes held up the final page of the book, which bore a strange watermark, almost like a symbol burned into the paper, an inverted hourglass, flanked by two stylized ravens. That, Holmes said, is not Stackwood's mark. It's someone else's. Someone who wanted us to find this and draw a false conclusion. We stood there for a moment in silence, the only sound being the distant drip of water echoing through the stone corridor. Holmes finally turned to me. Someone removed the real manuscript and replaced it with this prop, not to hide it, but to mislead. So who would do such a thing? Holmes's voice was grim. Someone who knew Stackwood was in danger. Or someone who wanted to ensure no one else found what he did. Suddenly, a noise, a faint shift, somewhere behind us. A footstep? A scrape against the stone. Holmes immediately extinguished the lantern. Darkness consumed us. We stood still, silent. Another sound. Then, a distant creak. The trapdoor above, slowly closing. We stood frozen in the darkness, every breath sounding louder than it should. Somewhere above us, the trapdoor had creaked. Not slammed, not forced, just gently closed. Holmes whispered. "Stay absolutely still," I obeyed, straining my ears. Footsteps, slow, faint, receding. Holmes tapped my shoulder lightly, and moved toward the corridor with silent precision. I followed, my heartbeat a thunder compared to his ghost-like steps. As we reached the base of the stairwell again, Holmes crouched and examined the trapdoor. His fingers brushed along the edge. "Someone was watching us," he said softly. "Do you think they saw what we found?" I whispered back. He shook his head. "Unlikely." The door creaked the moment they closed it. Not opened it. My guess is they followed us, waited, and sealed us in. "Sealed us in?" I asked, alarmed. Holmes smiled faintly, and reached into his coat. "Don't worry, Watson. I brought rope." We ascended carefully. At the top, Holmes wedged the lantern into a groove, and began tying the rope to a support beam. "Someone in the house doesn't want us digging further," he said, as he secured the knot. "That narrows the list. You suspect Wilkins. I suspect anyone who had access to that room. Wilkins, the housemaid, even Lestrade's men. Though I doubt they have the subtlety." I steadied the rope as Holmes climbed up first. The old beam groaned under our weight but held. Within moments we were back in the library, the rug gently pulled over the trapdoor once again. Lestrade stood at the doorway, looking more flustered than usual. "There you are," he barked. "You've been gone nearly an hour." "We were inspecting a room hidden beneath the library," Holmes said calmly, "and someone attempted to lock us in." Lestrade blinked. What Holmes ignored him for now, and turned to Wilkins, who stood a few paces behind with wide, nervous eyes. "Wilkins, I'll need a list of every individual who's entered this house in the past 48 hours. Staff, visitors, even delivery men." Wilkins nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir. And bring me any keys you can find for the basement or lower levels." Once the man left, Holmes began pacing. "The red leather book was a fake," he said, "planted recently. But it bore a symbol, a mark I've seen once before, where I asked in a case I investigated years ago, a secret society known as the Order of the Silent Vow. Obscure, reclusive, and fiercely protective of ancient knowledge." Quote. I felt a chill. "Are you saying Stackwood was involved with a cult?" Holmes shook his head. "Not necessarily a cult, a network. Academics, collectors, translators. People who believe certain truths must remain buried, and Stackwood, I prompted, may have uncovered something the Order wanted hidden. Or worse, may have tried to publish it." Holmes walked over to the fireplace and poked at the embers with the iron rod. A spark flared briefly. Then, from inside the ashes, he pulled something small, a corner of burnt parchment. He examined it. A partial symbol, smudged with soot, but identical to the one on the red book's final page. "He tried to burn the original manuscript," Holmes muttered, "but only partially succeeded. Why I asked if he wanted it preserved. Perhaps he changed his mind. Or someone forced his hand." Holmes stood up, brushing soot from his fingers. "There's a war going on beneath the surface of this city, Watson. Not of guns or swords, but of ideas. Dangerous ones. And Stackwood got caught in the crossfire." By early evening, Stackwood Manor had grown even quieter. The fire had dimmed to embers and a storm gathered outside. A low, rumbling sound, barely audible through the thick glass windows. Holmes stood by the fireplace, eyes locked on the burnt scrap in his fingers. "I've seen this symbol twice now," he murmured once in Prague. "And now here. What did it mean back then?" I asked, leaning on the armchair. In Prague, it marked the entrance to a hidden archive, a library beneath a monastery, filled with censored texts and banned manuscripts, the same inverted hourglass, the same ravens, Holmes turned to me. Whatever Stackwood discovered, Watson, it wasn't just dangerous, it was forbidden. Before I could respond, Wilkins re-entered the room, carrying a leather-bound journal in both hands. Sir, this is the guest ledger. Names and times of entry for the past week. Holmes took it without a word. He flipped through it quickly, then stopped. Here, he said, tapping a name with his finger. 2 nights before Stackwood's death, I leaned in. B. Mallory. Arrived 8:37 p.m. Departed 9:12 p.m. Does that name mean anything to you? I asked Mallory. Holmes repeated, it might. Quote. He closed the ledger, walked briskly to the writing desk, and began searching through the drawers. Within seconds, he pulled out an envelope with Stackwood's handwriting, addressed simply. To be opened only if I am gone. Holmes glanced at me once before breaking the seal. Inside was a short letter. Holmes. If you're reading this, I've likely paid the price for digging too deep. The man who visited me, Mallory, is not who he claims to be. He belongs to the Order. He came for the manuscript. I refused. If they've returned, then the silence I guarded will no longer be enough. Burn this letter once read. A.S. Holmes folded the letter and placed it into the inner pocket of his coat. I will not burn it, he said softly. Wilkins lingered nearby, clearly rattled. Sir, if I may. Mr. Mallory, he wasn't like our usual visitors. He asked to see the lower levels, and Mr. Stackwood denied him. After he left, Mr. Stackwood locked the basement door and kept the key on him. Holmes looked up sharply, but when we went down there, it wasn't locked. No, sir. It wasn't. Wilkins hesitated. That means someone else had a key, or took it after. Holmes nodded slowly, which suggests the killer returned after the fact. Perhaps even entered through the servant's path. Just then Lestrade reappeared, holding a small wooden box. Found this tucked behind the butler's quarters. Thought it was odd. Holmes took the box and opened it carefully. Inside were a small vial of dried ink, a worn fountain pen, a torn piece of parchment, and a signet ring engraved with the same inverted hourglass and ravens. I felt a chill as I looked at Holmes' proof. He nodded, circumstantial, but telling. He held up the ring to the candlelight. The symbol shimmered faintly. We're being drawn into something far older than a murder, Watson. This is a war of information, of secrecy, and that symbol. It's not a threat. It's a warning. Rain now fell in sheets against the windows of Stackwood Manor. Thunder cracked above like the sky itself was breaking apart. Holmes moved with renewed urgency, the ring still clenched in his hand. There's more to this house than Wilkins knows, he said, and I intend to find it. He returned to the fireplace and ran his fingers along the brickwork. Stackwood wouldn't leave something so valuable in an unlocked basement. The real manuscript has to be somewhere else. Watson stood by the shelves, watching. Then where would he hide it? Holmes's hand paused near the corner of the fireplace. He leaned in. Here he pressed a specific brick. A soft click echoed. The panel beside the fireplace shuddered, then slowly opened, revealing a narrow vertical slit in the wall. A passage, Holmes breathed, hidden behind the hearth. Yes, and barely wide enough for one man at a time. They lit a fresh lantern, and without hesitation, Holmes slipped inside. I followed close behind, crouched and careful. The air was damp and stale. The passage twisted downward, carved directly into the stone. At the end of the descent, we came upon a small chamber. Unlike the dusty basement, this room was meticulously clean. The floor had been swept. The shelves gleamed. This is no storage room, Holmes said. This is where he worked. And at the far end, on a solid oak table, sat a single black box, locked with a brass mechanism. Holmes knelt and examined it. Watson, hand me my toolkit. I passed him the roll of instruments he carried for delicate operations. He worked quickly, whispering to himself, not a standard lock. This is keyed to timing, not tension. He aligned the tumblers carefully. Click. The box opened. Inside lay a stack of handwritten pages. The manuscript. Holmes lifted the first page. It was dense. Paragraphs scribbled in Stackwood's tight, slanted handwriting. He scanned the first few lines aloud. To those who read these pages, I warn you, truth is not light, it is not clarity, it is burden. The Order was right to fear it. But fear is not reason enough to kill. Holmes looked at me, eyes solemn. He knew what he was doing. He flipped through more pages, diagrams, translations, even sketches of symbols identical to the ones on the ring. "This is what Mallory came for," he said. "This is what they killed him over. Then we must take it to the yard." I said no. Holmes said firmly, "Not yet. If Lestrade takes it, it will vanish. If the Order suspects we've found it, they will come for it. And for us. So what then? We study it. We understand what Stackwood discovered. Only then can we decide who deserves to see it." Holmes reached into the box and removed one final item. A key. He turned it over. Etched on the side was a date. September 14th, 1849. "What happened that day?" I asked. Holmes stared at the key for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "But something tells me. That's where the truth began." The key weighed heavily in Holmes's hand, not in mass, but in implication. That engraved date, September 14th, 1849, echoed louder than thunder. We returned to the library in silence, each lost in thought. Outside, rain streamed in angry rivulets down the glass. Holmes lit a fresh candle. "We must find what this key unlocks," he said. "But first, that date. Why would Stackwood mark it unless it meant something specific?" I opened my notebook, 1849. Perhaps a historical event Holmes paced, or something personal. Something buried in the very roots of this house. He suddenly turned Wilkins. The butler, standing quietly by the study door, straightened. "Yes, sir. Did Mr. Stackwood ever speak of 1849? Any family stories, ledgers, or ancestral records tied to that year?" Wilkins furrowed his brow. "No, sir. But I recall he once mentioned a great-uncle, Erasmus Stackwood. Lived during that time. Bit of a recluse, if memory serves. Died mysteriously." Holmes's eyes lit up. "That's it." He crossed to the bookshelf and pulled down an old genealogy ledger. Dust flew. The binding crackled as he flipped through brittle pages. "Erasmus Stackwood," Holmes murmured. "Died. September 14th, 1849. Official cause, heart failure. But here," he pointed, "no burial records." I leaned closer. "Then what happened to him?" "No grave, no obituary. Just vanished into history." Holmes tapped the side of the key. "This isn't just a date. It's a direction. We searched the manor for hours, starting with the oldest wings. Rooms unused for decades. Floorboards groaned. Cobwebs clung. In a back corner of the western wing, a hallway lined with portraits. Holmes froze there," he said. "A faded oil painting of Erasmus Stackwood. Gaunt face, sharp nose, and oddly, the same signet ring on his left hand." "Help me move this," Holmes said. We slid the portrait aside. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a metal keyhole, the exact shape of the brass key. He inserted it. Click. A panel released. A draft of air escaped, cool and ancient. A spiral staircase curved downward, chiseled from stone. No records, no burial. Because this is where he went. We descended slowly. The stairs led to a vaulted chamber, octagonal, lit by remnants of old sconces. Dust blanketed the floor. In the center, a stone sarcophagus. Holmes approached it with reverence. On the lid, carved in Latin, "He who carries knowledge beyond time rests not in peace." He traced the inscription, then turned to me. "This is not just a tomb." I stepped closer. A shelf beside the sarcophagus held another book, bound in dark leather, but older than any we'd seen. Holmes opened it. It was a journal. Erasmus's handwriting. "The manuscript is dangerous. They tried to silence me. But I buried the truth, within my own name, within the blood that carries it forward." "Stackwood wasn't just a collector," Holmes said softly. "He was the heir to something secret. Something old. Erasmus passed it down, through generations." I exhaled slowly. "And now it's in our hands." Holmes closed the journal and looked at me. "We're not chasing a killer anymore, Watson. We're chasing a legacy." We emerged from the crypt hours later, rain still tapping at the manor's windows like an impatient guest. Holmes carried the journal under his coat, shielding it from the moisture in the air. Back in the drawing room, Lestrade sat with a scowl, a fresh cigar smoldering between his fingers. "You both vanished again," he said. Care to explain? This time Holmes didn't sit. He remained standing, one hand resting on the mantelpiece. We found a tomb, he said calmly. Lestrade raised an eyebrow. A tomb. A sealed chamber beneath the west wing. Erasmus Stackwood's resting place. Though I suspect he would have objected to the word resting. Lestrade opened his mouth to speak, but a knock at the door cut him off. Wilkins entered a moment later, pale. There's a man here to see you, sir. He wouldn't give his full name, just said Mallory. He insists it's urgent. Holmes straightened, then glanced at me. So the vulture returns. Should I let him in? Wilkins asked. Absolutely. Moments later, Mallory entered. He was tall, wiry, and completely dry, despite the rain outside. His eyes were sharp, his face composed. Mr. Holmes, he said with a shallow nod. Dr. Lestrade stood, fists clenched. You left your name in Stackwood's guest ledger the night before his death. Why? Mallory ignored him. Instead he looked directly at Holmes. You found it, didn't you? Holmes tilted his head. The manuscript, or the tomb? Mallory didn't answer. Holmes continued. Stackwood said you were with the order. That you came for the pages. I came to protect them, Mallory said, and to protect others from them. You killed him. Mallory's jaw tightened. No. But I warned him what would happen if he tried to publish. Lestrade stepped forward. Enough riddles. Either you cooperate or I. Holmes held up a hand. Let him speak. Mallory glanced toward the window. Lightning flashed. The order is real. We are not a cult, nor a secret government. We are guardians of things too old, too dangerous. Erasmus was one of us. Stackwood was his blood. But he went rogue. He looked at Holmes. You weren't supposed to find the tomb. But now you have. And you hold something that doesn't belong to you. Holmes met his gaze evenly. Stackwood left it in our care. We'll decide its fate. Mallory's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. A tension beneath the surface. You don't understand what that manuscript contains. Then explain it. Mallory hesitated. It's not magic. It's not prophecy. It's language. A forgotten one. But those who speak it, their minds change. They see things differently. Obsession follows. Madness. Sometimes Watson whispered. You think knowledge itself is the threat. I know it is, Mallory replied. A long silence followed. Holmes finally asked, What happens if we don't give it to you? Mallory turned to leave. Then more will come. Not all as polite. He paused at the door. You have until dawn. After Mallory left, the manor seemed colder. Holmes stood motionless by the window, staring out at the dark lawn soaked in moonlight and rain. Behind him, I sat in silence, the journal resting between us on the table. Closed, yet louder than any storm outside. Lestrade broke the silence. You're not seriously considering keeping this thing, are you? Holmes didn't turn. Consideration ended hours ago. You think he was bluffing? No. I think he was warning us. Lestrade folded his arms. Then give it to the Yard. Let the government sort it out. Holmes finally turned. You saw what the government did with the last piece of ancient knowledge. They couldn't explain. They buried it. In stone and secrecy. And people died all the same. I shifted in my chair. We have to be careful, Holmes. If Mallory was telling the truth, even reading this could be dangerous. Holmes walked over to the journal and gently opened the cover. I've read dangerous things before. It's not the words that are perilous. It's what men are willing to do to suppress them. He turned a few pages, scanning quietly, then paused. There's a location mentioned here. Not far from London. A vault, locked since 1849. Lestrade leaned forward. So there's more. Holmes nodded. This is only part of the manuscript. The rest was hidden. He tapped the passage with his finger buried beneath a chapel. Abandoned, no longer on any map. Lestrade exhaled. This keeps getting worse. And yet, Holmes said softly, I feel we're close to the truth, not just of Stackwood's death, but of something older, something bound to his family, and now tangled with ours. A loud crack interrupted him. Not thunder this time. Gunfire. It echoed from outside the manor, near the east gate. We all sprang to our feet. Holmes rushed to the window and threw it open. 2 dark figures were darting through the garden, one limping. A third collapsed near the hedges. Wilkins! Holmes shouted, stay with the door. Watson, with me. He grabbed his revolver and ran. We chased into the night, over slick stone, through tall grass glistening with rain. The fallen man moaned in pain, clutching his leg. The others had disappeared. Holmes knelt beside him, pressing 2 fingers to his throat. Alive, he said. But barely. Lestrade caught up, pistol drawn. Who is he? The man's coat was torn, but a glint on his ring finger answered for him. Same symbol. The order had come. Not to talk. To take. By dawn, the wounded man was in custody, his wound bandaged, his identity confirmed, another low-ranking member of the order. He had said nothing, but his silence only deepened the urgency. Holmes stood over the journal, eyes scanning the map penciled on the back of the final page. This chapel, he said, abandoned in 1872, built over an older structure. Do we know where it is? I asked. He nodded. Near Marlow, 40 miles west of London. If we leave now, we can reach it before noon. Lestrade, standing at the threshold, looked exhausted but alert. I'll come. And I'm bringing 2 constables. Holmes didn't argue. By mid-morning we stood before the crumbling remnants of a stone chapel in the woods. Its steeple had collapsed, decades ago. Ivy crawled up the walls like veins. This place is older than it looks, Holmes muttered. He led us inside. The air was cool and still. Beneath the cracked stone floor, he found what he was looking for, a rectangular slab, faintly marked with the same inverted hourglass. He drew a small iron lever from his coat and used it to lift the slab. A staircase waited beneath. This time, we descended together. Holmes, myself, Lestrade, and 2 officers. Our boots echoed down the stone steps. The vault below was vast, circular, silent, and lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient scrolls, bound manuscripts, and objects that defied immediate classification. This isn't a hiding place, I whispered. It's a sanctuary. Holmes didn't answer. He approached the center, a stone pedestal, and on it, a sealed copper cylinder. He examined it carefully. It's the other half, he said. Stackwood's manuscript was only the beginning. Lestrade glanced around. We'll need a full team. Archaeologists. Historians. Holmes shook his head. And word will spread before the hour's out. And then, the order will return, in force. Suddenly, a sound. Footsteps, from above. We froze. One of the constables drew his weapon. Holmes whispered, "Light out." Now. We extinguished our lanterns. The chamber plunged into darkness. A figure descended slowly. Only one. A tall man. Cloaked. Mallory. Holmes stepped forward. Voice calm. You followed us. I knew where you'd go. It was always going to end here. No more warnings? Holmes asked. No more time, Mallory replied. You open that cylinder, and what's inside will not stay contained. Lestrade raised his pistol. Don't come closer. Mallory ignored him. You think this is about a manuscript? About knowledge? No, it's about ignition. Ideas spread like fire. Some are sparks. Others are detonations. Holmes's voice was firm. Then let us judge for ourselves. Mallory's face remained unreadable. You won't get the chance. Then, he moved. Fast. A blur in the darkness. A shot rang out. By dawn, the wounded man was in custody, his wound bandaged, his identity confirmed. Another low-ranking member of the order. He had said nothing, but his silence only deepened the urgency. Holmes stood over the journal, eyes scanning the map penciled on the back of the final page. This chapel, he said, abandoned in 1872, built over an older structure. Do we know where it is? I asked. He nodded. Near Marlow, 40 miles west of London. If we leave now, we can reach it before noon. Lestrade, standing at the threshold, looked exhausted, but alert. I'll come. And I'm bringing 2 constables. Holmes didn't argue. By mid-morning we stood before the crumbling remnants of a stone chapel in the woods. Its steeple had collapsed decades ago. Ivy crawled up the walls like veins. This place is older than it looks, Holmes muttered. He led us inside. The air was cool and still. Beneath the cracked stone floor he found what he was looking for, a rectangular slab, faintly marked with the same inverted hourglass. He drew a small iron lever from his coat and used it to lift the slab. A staircase waited beneath. This time we descended together. Holmes, myself, Lestrade, and 2 officers. Our boots echoed down the stone steps. The vault below was vast, circular, silent, and lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient scrolls, bound manuscripts, and objects that defied immediate classification. "This isn't a hiding place," I whispered. "It's a sanctuary." Holmes didn't answer. He approached the center, a stone pedestal, and on it, a sealed copper cylinder. He examined it carefully. "It's the other half," he said. Stackwood's manuscript was only the beginning. Lestrade glanced around. "We'll need a full team. Archaeologists, historians." Holmes shook his head. "And word will spread before the hour's out. And then, the order will return. In force." Suddenly, a sound. Footsteps. From above. We froze. One of the constables drew his weapon. Holmes whispered, "Light out. Now." We extinguished our lanterns. The chamber plunged into darkness. A figure descended slowly. Only one. A tall man. Cloaked. "Mallory." Holmes stepped forward, voice calm. "You followed us. I knew where you'd go. It was always going to end here." "No more warnings?" Holmes asked. "No more time," Mallory replied. "You open that cylinder, and what's inside will not stay contained." Lestrade raised his pistol. "Don't come closer." Mallory ignored him. "You think this is about a manuscript, about knowledge? No, it's about ignition. Ideas spread like fire. Some are sparks." The gunshot rang like thunder. Mallory stumbled. Holmes had fired, but not to kill. The bullet had grazed Mallory's shoulder, spinning him sideways and knocking him against a column. In the same instant, Lestrade and the constables surged forward, subduing him with swift efficiency. Holmes stood over him, breathing hard. "You came to destroy it," he said. Mallory winced, holding his shoulder. "I came to stop the chain before it begins." Holmes didn't respond. Instead, he turned to the copper cylinder and gently twisted the seal. It hissed, ancient air escaping after decades in silence. Inside, a scroll. Holmes unrolled it slowly, scanning its contents. His eyes moved with both fascination and dread. "It's not just theology," he murmured. "It's engineering, language, ciphers, hidden philosophies. A full schema of thought designed to embed influence silently into culture." Watson swallowed. "That's why they called it the silent vow." Holmes nodded. "Ideas designed to whisper, not shout. To seep, not strike." Lestrade looked impatient. "So what now? Do we take it, burn it, lock it away again?" Quote. Holmes rolled the scroll back carefully and resealed the cylinder. Then, to everyone's surprise, he walked to the far end of the vault, approached a small hollow in the stone wall, and placed the cylinder inside. He bricked it shut using mortar from a nearby crack. I stared. Holmes. He dusted off his hands. "No one can destroy ideas. But we can delay their delivery." Mallory sat slumped, silent. Holmes faced us all. "This vault, this secret, will sleep again. Let the world wake to it only when it is ready." Lestrade said nothing. Neither did I. As we ascended the stairs, leaving the vault behind, I looked back one last time. The cylinder was hidden, the chamber still, a tomb of truth. Outside, the storm had cleared. Morning light filtered through bare branches. Holmes paused at the chapel's ruined door, looking skyward. "The dead speak," he said, "but only to those who truly listen." He walked on, his coat catching the wind like a sail in search of new waters. I followed, and behind us, in the damp soil of England, the past rested once more, silent, but not forgotten. "Hers are detonations." Holmes's voice was firm. "Then, let us judge for ourselves." Mallory's face remained unreadable. "You won't get the chance." Quote. Then he moved. Fast, a blur in the darkness, a shot rang out. If you enjoyed this mystery, don't forget to subscribe. More chilling cases, more brilliant deductions, only on The Detective Files.